everyone. My name is Man, and I'm from Let's Recover Online. And today we have a very special guest, and he's called Simon. And today's topic is chosen by Simon, and it's a very interesting topic, and it's about loneliness. Loneliness in sobriety. So over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Man. I've known Man for a while. I used to be a serious user of drink and drugs and came into recovery about 5 years ago, and I recently celebrated 4 years of sobriety. And I wanted to talk a little bit about loneliness. Thanks to Man for asking me, because I do live alone, and I was living alone when I came into recovery. But first of all, I want to make this point that being alone, being lonely, has nothing to do with whether or not there are people around you. It's a state of mind. So, when I was a vigorous, active drinker and addict, I often was around people. I knew a lot of people, but I became more and more isolated in my own mind. And I think that needs to be understood. And secondly, you can be alone, but not be isolated. So if you're healthy in your mind and your habits, then you can spend time on your own and not feel lonely or isolated. So the fact that we get to a point where we feel desperate and alone is to do with our addictions and our failure really to address them. And what happened to me, and I'm a very gregarious person, and one of the things that's happened since I started to recover is that I'm once again meeting people. I've got a diners club going on where I invite a few people that I like to dinner a couple of times a month, things that I never did when I was an active addict. Because one of the things that addiction does, and I've heard this a few times from addicts, it's quite clever. Your addiction wants to get you alone in order to kill you, but it doesn't want to kill you straight away. It wants to get you alone and then torment you for a while before it kills you. And the voice in your head, as you get more and more into your active addiction, will say, wouldn't it be a good idea if I went off and had a drink or bought some gear or locked myself up on my own? That would really take care of the discomfort that I'm feeling at the moment. And of course, that's a huge lie. It won't. It'll give you a momentary joy, perhaps, but very quickly you'll be even more isolated and dismayed and confused and unhappy than you were before. So one of the first things to observe is that by seeking the company of other people who are the same as you, but in recovery, that is other addicts who understand what it's like to be lonely and isolated, they understand it completely because they've been there, is an enormous relief, because you don't have to pretend. They know exactly what you mean and what you're going through. And one of the things at the very beginning, if any of you who are listening to this are struggling with addictions and deciding whether or not to come into recovery, I know a lot of you will be spending money on conventional therapists and doctors, and they might be well-meaning people. They probably are. For decades, I spent money on all kinds of therapy. I only really started to get better when I started to work with other addicts and alcoholics who understood what it was like, recovering ones, that is, and recovered ones. Why is that? Well, because nobody who isn't like us can really understand us. However sympathetic they are, we seem crazy. We deliberately take a wonderful life and we wreck it. We do things that alienate us from people that love us, like our partners and our children and our parents. And we do it not just once, but repeatedly. And despite having every opportunity to change, ordinary people, however much they love us, don't understand that. It seems either mysterious, or for many of them, it seems willful. They become impatient. They say, you're doing this deliberately, and I had that so much. All of you, if you're listening to this, will have had somebody say to you, in effect, pull yourself together. You know what? That's the worst advice you can give anyone that's an addict, because it's an illness. So just to go back to the beginning, when I became, one of the signs that I was becoming a more active addict and alcoholic was, I remember at university, and this is a long time ago because I'm 64 years old now. and I've only been sober for 4.5 years,
Mm-hmm.
was my mates would say, let's do something. And we would get ready to go out, and then we'd have a bit of a drink, and then we'd maybe smoke something or use something. And at that point, I didn't really want to go out. They wanted to go out, and I wanted to just sit around and continue to put things in my body, probably until I'd completely lost control, had a blackout or whatever. That's the difference between ordinary people that can have a bit of fun and stop, and those of us that just once started can never step back, you know. I heard it said by an alcoholic, you know, one drink is too many and 1,000 are never enough. You know, we can't put anything in our body or we completely lose control. So you know, that process began with me quite early on, and I got lonelier and lonelier and lonelier as I got older and older and older. And I wasn't lonely in the sense that I wasn't around people. On the contrary, I was really busy. I had my own company. I was flying hither and thither, but late at night and in my own room, you know, I was a fearful, often crying ruin, not knowing what to do with myself. And it wasn't until I sat down with somebody else who'd recovered from the same, was recovering from the same thing as me, and listened to what he or she had to say, that I realized that I wasn't alone, I wasn't unique, and that there was a solution. And the solution does not lie in being alone and trying to beat it with your intellect. I see this over and over again in people that are just coming into recovery because they recognize that they have an issue. They'll say, well, you know, I've got it figured out, or I can control it, or, you know, all of those good things. Doesn't matter how, it's not an intellectual challenge, you know, this. It's recognizing that you have a disease that wants to isolate you, that you're powerless over your disease, and that you need to get into the company of other recovering addicts and alcoholics if you're to have any chance of shedding that loneliness and discovering that there are people that you can be completely honest with. And, you know, that's what happened to me. You know, I don't want to go on about myself too much because it's tedious, but in the last 6 months, I celebrated 4 years sobriety, was diagnosed with a serious form of cancer, had a 7-hour surgery, and from which I'm now recovering, and published a book, all in the course of 4 months. None of that could have happened if I was still drinking and using. And the reason it happened is because I came into recovery with other alcoholics and addicts, and I learned to come to terms with the fact that I have no control over my addiction, to deal with the things in the past that were dragging me back, and to look forward in a positive way. And I start every day with a prayer of gratitude because I am grateful. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to have Man as a friend, and I'm grateful to be here on this wonderful sunny Easter Friday in Singapore.
Thank you, Simon. So I have a few thoughts and questions. I think what's interesting about loneliness, about being alone, is this idea of disconnection. You know, I think when we're very connected to the rest of the world and to people and to love and to, you know, it's a very it's the opposite feeling, you know, of feeling like nobody understands me. You know, I can't connect with people no matter how much I try. And I don't know if you drank partly because you wanted to fit in. You know, I drank very much so. Like I want, and when I'm sober, my mind starts to say stuff, and when I'm around people, it tends to go on a negative slant, right? It tends to go into like, that's stupid. What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. Like you know, a lot of judgments come in, and it's very difficult. It's very unbearable, you know. Whereas when I was drinking, a few drinks later, I could tolerate anybody. You know, like my tolerance is very low. When I had a few drinks and drugs or whatever, my tolerance goes up. I don't really care, you know. So what do you think causes this disconnection? I think that's, or why do we like that disconnection almost?
Well, there are a lot of theories about this. I mean, first of all, I don't think it always means that people are suffering from trauma, although sometimes it does. I mean, in my case, you know, childhood trauma has been an issue, and I've been able to come to terms